back here on our software engineering lecture for the third week. And today is the 20th of April, Monday. And before I begin, I would like to show you where we are in the course syllabus. Okay. Um, in the lecture part, we are here on the 20th of April, and we're supposed to talk about analysis. So I have introduced you to software engineering and reviewed you on the UML modeling language. The UML is what we're going to use for modeling and design. We've gone through project organization. You are organized. You have project managers, assistant project managers, and software engineers. For the testing team, we call them the QA team. There is a team lead and there are QA engineers. And how we communicate with each other, we define that, and we use primarily Slack to be able to communicate with each other. And the requirements elicitation is getting from your client what the client wants. And we talk about what are the things that you should ask from the client. There are two things that you are supposed to ask them. What are the functional requirements and what are the non-functional requirements? The client may not know the non-functional requirements, but you should be able to derive these non-functional requirements from the functions and what the client wants. So for this particular week, we're going to talk about analysis. So before we undertake the project, we should be able to do some analysis and check whether the requirements we obtain from the client is well understood, it is complete, and it's not wrong. All right. So how do we do that? That's a big task to do, but there are tools that we can use. I've told you that the SRS is going to be due the weekend of this particular week. I told you 20th of April. All the dates that you see over here are Mondays of that week. So I would expect your SRS to be submitted by the 26th of April. That's the Sunday of that of this week. And as you see over here, other documents are going to be due as well. These are also due on the weekend of the week of the 27th of April. And SPMP and SQAP are succeeding or next documents that you will need to submit. Okay, so this particular week or this week that we have today will focus more on the writing of the document. Okay, and let me show you the deliverables. For this week, you will have your last training and tutorials about iOS and Android. The TAs are giving you assignments to make sure you are learning and are trying out the things that you have learned. This is the last week of our tutorials, training and tutorials. So just like in a software company, when you have newly joined a software company, you go to training first. You don't have the luxury of a long period of training. You need to be able to learn new things, new languages, and new systems quickly. Um, Sometimes, or most often, they want a um, um, a newly hired person, or when they interview you for the position, they want a quick learner or an independent person who can study and learn by themselves and quickly. So they want a person they can train very quickly. And the following week, the 27th of April, we launch the official launching of the development of prototype number one. Now, looking ahead, prototype number one will be delivered on the week of the 18th of May. So that's our first iteration. As I have explained to you, we will develop our software project in two iterations. Prototype one will be due on the week of the 18th, and QA testing will be done during that period. So the QA team uh, should be able to tell you whether you pass or fail the testing. If you fail the testing, they will explain or tell you how did they get to the error or fault, and you fix it and they test again and until you pass. So that is a big deadline that you should watch out, and you should plan for that. Plan how you will deliver the first prototype. Then we go to a second iteration. We launch our prototype 2 development, and on the finals day, which is the 12th of June, you deliver prototype number 2. All right. So project managers, assistant project managers, and team lead, QA team lead, um, you should be planning and looking ahead on this delivery of prototype 1 and prototype 2. Okay? Okay. Um, let's go to the next slide. And last week, we spent a lot of time on software requirement specification. So let me do that. And okay, let me uh, let me do this again. I'm sorry. I always uh, make this error. I don't know where the cursor has been, but as you can see here, um, we will write the SRS, which is our um, next for the next deliverable, or the deliverable that we will be doing. So the SRS, when we were discussing it last week, uh, let me again reiterate the uh, the big parts of the software requirement specification. This is the most important document of the artifacts that you are creating for the software. Without this, um, you will not know what is the software written for, because the SRS contains the functions. And what is important in section 1 is the purpose and scope of the software development. You must tell a little bit about the purpose or the background of the software development and the scope, what the software can do and what the software cannot do. In section 2, the two most important parts is the system interface. This gives you the development diagram showing all the software and hardware that you will need in order to run your software. The user interface, remember, is the definition and listing of all the user interface that you will be designing, and the user interface is the window to the software for the user to obtain the functions that it needs from the software. Another important part of section 2 is the use case diagram. Use case diagram shows the actors who are the actors are the users of your system, and each actor is provided with a set of use case. The use case is a verb or an action word of what this actor is asking the software to do. So that is why I keep saying that this use case must be a verb or an action word. What is the software going to do for this particular actor? And section 3, the most important part are the design of the screen, the user interface that the user or actor will see from your software. So the functional requirements will show the screen. Mode 1 could be actor number 1, and what are the functional requirement that this actor will need. Second actor, what are the functional requirements that this actor number 2 will need from the software, and so on and so forth. Okay, now performance requirements is a specific non-functional requirement, but it is important in terms of the time that that the actor or user will wait to get to the next command or the next request for service from the software. And usually this is in terms of seconds. How many seconds? Maximum number of seconds that the actor or user will wait to enter his or her next command. And the other requirements are the other non-functional requirements that the software must have in order to in order for the client to be satisfied with your software. So other requirements are usability, reliability, maintainability, and all the other ilities that we have described before. Okay, so remember those. Those are the things I'm going to review from your document to make sure that you have fulfilled the requirements of the software requirement spec. All right. Now, let's look at the sample software requirement specification. I told you last time that I prefer the second example of the SRS, and you should be able to follow this example of the SRS. Now, this is not, of course, the SRS of your of your software project. Um, if you inherit software artifacts from the previous team, you should have a copy of the previous SRS. So your work is a little bit easier because all you have to do is edit and modify that document to conform to what is the requirements that you are supposed to do now. So if you inherit a software artifact that consists of the SRS, you are in luck. Now, if the previous team did not keep their software artifacts in our repository, then you are in for a more work because you will start the software requirement specification from scratch, and so you have no template. There is no previous SRS to edit from. So what you can do is begin from scratch and using this sample SRS. You follow the template and write your SRS in accordance to what are the functional and non-functional requirements of your software. So this sample here will be important for those teams who don't have a previous SRS inherited from a previous team. All right. So just giving you highlights of what I'm going to look for in your SRS. First, you must follow the format of the IEEE standard for SRS. This is what we define as the software process for writing SRS. So instead of a informal or ad hoc format of a software requirement spec, we follow a standard, and the standard is the IEEE. So if you join a company and they follow the IEEE standard, you got it made. You you know, excuse me, how to write SRS, and if the company has their own format of an SRS, well, you have to study it and be familiar with it. It is a good practice for software company to maintain a one format for all the SRS that they are writing. All right, so it must have introduction, overall description, specific requirements. Okay, as I have discussed with you last time, I need more, in this example here, I need more background. You must tell a short story about what is the previous software you inherited and what are you, who are you who is continuing this project. You must also mention the name of the client, affiliation of the client, and who are you. Of course, you will define. You will define yourself as team. I don't know, team iBox, and you are software engineers in the CSE 455 Inc. Software company. So create, make some realistic description about who you are and who is the client. The next section is very important. I will look at what are the things or functions, may not be as formal as listing the the function in a use case diagram, but I should be able to read here of what the software can do for prototype 1 and prototype 2. As I said, we will have 2 iterations in our development. So what can prototype 1 do and what can prototype number 2 do? And if there are limitations, you must also specify here in this section that it can't, one particular example is that it can't serve more than 50 users at one time. And that would be a limitation of what the software uh, cannot do. So maybe a fixed number of simultaneous users it can support, and for this prototype that will be a limitation. Okay, definitions and acronyms. Make sure you have a good list of definitions, acronyms, and abbreviations. This is a one way of eliminating ambiguities in your use of terms and acronyms. And if the client is not familiar with computer terms, then you should define it. And if your client is in an expertise is in business, then you should include terms, business terms, that could be misinterpreted or misunderstood by you because you are not in the business domain. All right. So the definitions and acronyms tries to avoid ambiguities. All right. References. I want you to list. Um, 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 I will require that you mention the IEEE software engineering reference, the book of UML Distilled, and the software artifact of SRS. You should reference here if you are using it as a template, or you are actually editing the previous SRS, then it must be referenced here. If you are not, then of course there is nothing to reference back. Then you have to begin from the beginning. But and if you use this SRS for optimal state as your template, you should also write here as one of your references. Okay. All right. So here, the system interface is very important because this defines all the hardware and software system that you will need to have in order to run your software. So the 2 mobile devices are represented as a 2D, two-dimensional box right here, and the software that runs inside the Android devices are they are app programs, mobile app programs that run inside this, and we represent, as I have told you, a UML diagram that looks like this: a box with 2 other boxes hanging on its left side. That is the representation of software running inside the hardware. And this software, you have probably you have to write it if you're using the iOS or the Android development tools, then they will be code that you have written here. Here inside the web server, here it is using a Firebase server. So all of this software that are running over here are probably APIs that you are using, and APIs nowadays are a common way of writing um, uh, software that provides service to your to your app. So you could divide them in several components, as you see over here, and APIs from the Firebase server will be utilized, so will be used to provide the web service, and the database server, or the database itself, is over here in the database server. Okay, now the explanation here of the deployment diagram to me is incomplete. I want additional explanation of each of these hardware, what are the hardware purpose, and what are the software purpose in the deployment diagram. So this uh, uh, this explanation over here is not enough. I want to have more explanation of um, the deployment diagram. All right. Now here in the user interface, now notice here that the document only explains two interfaces, one for the individual user and one for the provider. So user interfaces will be designed for the individual user and the provider, and they have a specific function that they require from the software. And over here is the use case diagram. And the use case diagram, as you see here, the user has four use case ovals, and the provider has three use case. And each of these use case will have a user interface design for that particular purpose. So let us say the general user wants to take assessment. So how does that user interface screen look like? The user here wants to access the content. So how does the user interface look like in to this user here? And this user interface design will not be shown here in section 2. They will be shown in the section number 3 for specific requirements. So I would recommend that instead of writing a paragraph here for the individual user, I want you to define the user interface for taking the assessment, a user interface for the access content, a user interface for the view history, and a user interface for the edit setting. So here in this section of user interface, I want you to define to me each of those use case, the use case that or the user interface for that use case, and for what is the purpose of that particular use case. No design. Remember, no design of screens yet. The design of screens will be in section number 3, specific requirement. The same thing for the provider. The provider defines the three use cases. And the three use cases add or remove client. So there will be a user interface for this function, and you define that in terms of description in the uh, section 2.1.2. So you define it there. Um, how does what is the view client uh, interface for? What is it for? What's the function? Editing settings, edit settings. You define that here in the user interface over here, okay, for the provider. But the design of the screen will not be here in section 2. It will be in section 3, specific requirements. Okay? Also, here in this product function, I want you to define in terms of words of what is take assessment function about. What is it? So for each of these oval representation here, discuss here in section 2.2 what is that function called take assessment. Okay, so that would be what I would look for in your document when you submit to me. Okay, so in the specific requirements, now you come over here and you define the functional requirements and user interface. So for each of those use case, you define a screen layout. So this is the welcome page, and then here is the page this is for creating an account. So it may not be mentioned in the use case diagram, but of course we need a screen how to create an account. And then here are the functions that the user will expect from the software. Take assessment, view current exercises, view history, and setting. Okay, so the rest of the document will be will consist of designs of screens. All right. As I have mentioned last week, this is usually done by a UI UX designer, which is experienced in terms of a good flow of sequences of screen to get to the function that you want. And that has something to do with usability, and hopefully you guys have a software engineer who could take that role of the UI UX designer, make sure that the flow of screens from one to the desired function is easily attained, and avoid confusing the user to actually get to the function that the user wants. All right, you don't want the user to be chasing chasing the function, looking for the function that it needs, and it runs around in a circle where you lead the user to the page where you began. And there is nothing frustrating to a user when you are given the runabout. Okay, you are running about and trying to um, try to get to the function that you need. I had my wife and I, as you know, restaurants are closed. So my wife and I used the Olive Garden order page. Uh, we got so frustrated with that website because we can select the food that we want. So we were able to select it. But then we couldn't find the function of finishing our order and submitting our order. For some reason, the website is not very clear on that particular button. It keeps us, it insists of us getting extra deal of, I think, a pizza and a spaghetti for $70. And we kept saying, no, we don't want it. We just want to get the total and pay with our credit card, but we couldn't get to that button of submitting our order and paying with our credit card. So we got frustrated and we just quit. And you don't want that to happen to your mobile app. Okay, you want to be friendly and uh, and be able to navigate through the mobile app with no confusion. All right. So here is the performance requirements. As you can see here, it didn't mention the seconds. I want that in the performance requirements, and we should test that. That if you say 3 seconds, you should have less 3 seconds or less that the mobile app respond back to the user, and all the other non-functional requirements, reliability, that means it's able to serve the user at, for anything that it requests for. Maintainability, we need to maintain the software. As you know, iOS updates your phone every evening when it is plugged to power, and so we had instances where the software has been updated and it's no longer running the software that we have developed. So we need to maintain or easily maintain the software, especially when the Swift library has been updated. Sometimes it deprecates some of your code and therefore it is no longer running. Portability, where we are running projects here in both iOS and Android, and the portability, this non-functional requirements that it is able to port to other platform is going to be a requirement. And if you have iOS and Android versions, you covered 96% of the market. The user, you pretty much cover all the users of mobile phones. Okay, so that would be the sample template, and I have given comments on this optimal mobile app that we have developed before. And take note of the comments I made on the optimal mobile app and avoid those uh, errors that I have stated and conform to my suggestions. Okay, so time to sit down um, and talk to your client, and uh, uh, the way you're going to communicate with your client is by any electronic means that is available to you, via email, via Zoom, or via Slack. Okay, make use of uh, this electronic remote electronic way to talk to the client. Okay, all right. Let me um, talk about the the different projects that you have that I have assigned to you, and give you a very brief um, kind of description of what the project they want you to undertake. Now, remember, you must elicit the requirements directly from the client, or else you will be building a software that the client may not like. All right, so that's a very, very important aspect of this part of the software requirement specification. Okay, all right. Uh, Let me go and if I can find my cursor. I lost my cursor again. Where are you? Okay. Let me do this. All right. Let me click on these projects. And here you are. These are the projects that we are undertaking for this particular quarter. And let me begin with iBox. Okay. iBox team, uh, the your client is Zoran Sivanovic, and you should be able to contact him either, as I said, email. You can arrange Zoom or invite him to your Slack group so he could be part of the discussion. Now, what I gathered from Zoran, the iBox is some sort of a suggestion box. Okay, so in any office or company, there is a box where you put your ideas or suggestions. Um, and then at the end of the day, or at the end of the week, or maybe never, management probably never look in there. Uh, uh, they open the box and find out what are the suggestions or comments by the employees. So they want to implement this iBox, and I think the current wish of Zoran is that this should be in both the iOS and Android. So we're still waiting for Zoran. You guys, the team that is in charge with this is uh, Adam and Travis. You are the project manager and assistant project manager. Uh, Try to get a hold of Zoran as soon as possible. And I spoke to him, and he promised he will support and get back to us about those information. But the most important information that we have is that he might go for both iOS, and Android. All right? They have an implementation already. They have an existing system, but he said it is horribly, horribly outdated. And and so but we have to look at the code. I don't know if they have an SRS. Probably not. It's a big. Uh, I think you can assume that they have no SRS because and they don't follow software engineering best practices, and so you will develop SRS from scratch, okay, and use the template SRS that I gave you to write your own. Okay, so that's the current situation. I don't know if you can use the code that they have already written, but it is still some artifact that you can use and analyze. Um, um, Probably, I would suggest don't waste your time looking at their source code because they probably is not running. Develop your own from scratch. All right, rather than understand what their code is doing. Uh, you write the SRS. From the SRS, you write your code. I think that's the best um, plan for this project. Okay? All right. Divining Rod. Divining Rod project is by the client is Mars de Guzman, and he is the CEO of Telcomtrix Philippines, and he is um, involved with agriculture uh, business in the provinces, and he wants to help the farmers find water underground during the dry season. There are only two seasons in the Philippines, the rainy season and the dry season. The farmers only plant during the rainy season. During the dry season, there is no planting of rice. So what he wants is to extend the season of planting by locating water underground during the dry season. He has um, bought an equipment that you measure resistivity of the soil between two probes. So the probes are stick into the ground, and they measure the resistivity of the soil. And according to some algorithm, the data that you get, which is the measurement of the resistivity, is converted to a graphics display of the water underground. And we had this project in the spring of 2019. Ben Alexander Yotie happens to be a member of that team, and he continued development of the graphics display on an Android phone during summer. So he was able to develop a graphics display that would uh, you can look at an Android phone. And so he will be your first best resource person for the graphics display. Now, get in touch with Mars de Guzman, and Mars has some algorithm that he wants you to try, and the hardware part is done in the Philippines. So all we are doing over here in this project is interface with this hardware, the probe that is measuring the resistivity, uh, give us the data, and the data we display on the uh, Android device. Okay, and I think Ben wrote some parts of it using MATLAB, and if it is, we cannot um, have the software um, or sell the software commercially, and so there might be some um, translating that we should do from MATLAB to um, um, another language, would be Java or Python and whatever is out there. So it's very important that you talk to Mars de Guzman and find out what is his um, idea for this next set. Okay? All right. SOS. SOS is a mobile app that we have been developing for more than 3 years. A school administrator from Rolling Heights Unified School District approached us and requested that this mobile app be developed for reporting student or staff or teacher reporting a emergency situation like a shooting information. As you know, the first responder, the police or the SWAT team, policy right now is not to wait for other first responder to come to the campus before confronting the shooter. Their policy now is to go where the shooting to go where the shooter is and prevent the shooter from inflicting more or killing more people or wounding more people. So the first responder must be given all the information that can be gathered by SOS to actually guide the first responder on what is the situation, where is the shooter, how many are wounded, and what kind of firearms they have. And this information are actually obtained from witnesses near or at the area where the shooting is occurring. So when a student, staff, or teacher witness shooting in the building, immediately they will report emergency on the SOS, and the map of the campus of where they are will be on the mobile app. It will indicate where you are on that campus map on the mobile phone, and if there is another or multiple witnesses that are there, they also report the incident. And so everybody in that campus would know where the location of the shooting is occurring. The first responders, the police or SWAT team, will also see the location. But in addition, the um, the witnesses who was able to see the emergency situation can exchange chat. So a chat session will be occurring between the witnesses, and the first responder can actually see that chat. So there could be information in the chat containing how many shooters there are, what kind of firearms they have, and other information. And so SOS was continued last fall by Rushabh Picha. He was my student in software engineering, and they were able, his team were able to improve SOS and was able to um, extend the SOS to the entire Cal State campus. Before, it was running only for Jack Brown, but now we have, I believe, 23, all 23 buildings in the campus. And he was also able to determine the floor in a building. If it is multiple floor like Jack Brown Hall, they were able to um, pinpoint the location on the exact floor. As you know, GPS doesn't work very well inside buildings, okay, especially multi-floor. All right. Next project is the Babolin, and Babolin has been developed maybe 2 years ago or maybe more. And Babolin is requested by Dr. Helena Ade from the College of Business, and he wants a replacement for Scantron. You are all familiar with Scantron, and it is um, answer sheet for answering multiple choice type of exam, and the Scantron, the reader, sometimes go down, and therefore delays the grading of the exam, and therefore um, uh, waste time of instructors waiting for the reader to come um, uh, uh, back into service. Also, the the reader gives wrong readings. So she requested us to develop a Babolin, and you know how to use Scantron. And Babolin is now fully functional. It has anti-cheating features, but we don't know yet. You students are very good in figuring out how to circumvent the system, and so we want you to look at the Babolin. Are there any other way the students can cheat? All right, but we have included many tools and extensions to Babolin. Chas Hampton was involved in the uh, the graduate school with me, and actually is the principal software engineer of Babolin, and we will have an iOS version of it. Okay, Know and Vote is a project requested by Julian Rubalcaba, and what he wants is a mobile app that would tell the readers about a particular candidate, and that candidate um, platform, or his where he or she stands on a particular issue. Know and Vote will gather blogs, newspaper articles, or um, news on cable news network, and kind of gather all the information about a candidate, and the user will determine where this political candidate stands for. with the November election, if it is going to happen this year, this mobile app would be very relevant to that election in November. Now, Breath of the Coyote is a mobile game that was developed in my game design class 440 last fall. And Breath of the Coyote is the champion game. You see, what I do in my class is um, I have a competition of all the teams uh, and their games, and what they do. Yeah, or on the finals, we have a competition with outside judges to determine the champion game. And Breath of the Coyote was the champion game of fall of 2019. And the you guys, by the way, Daniel Mayer was the project manager or the team lead of the champion game, Breath of the Coyote. So he would be a very good resource and also client for you for the Breath of the Coyote. So you will port it to an Android mobile game, and if you are able to produce a good um, port of the game, probably will publish it. Will ask for publication in the Google Play. All right. All right. Bidder game. Bidder team. I'm sorry. Bidder team is again requested by Mars de Guzman, a a CEO in Telcomtrex, and this bidder game, bidder team, I'm sorry, bidder team is a help for the farmers in the provinces to sell his rice at a fair price. You see, in the provinces, um, the farmer is at the mercy of third party people who buys rice from the farmer. And the bad thing about that is that these buyers take advantage of the farmers, because the farmers um, don't know the fair price, because uh, he uh, he doesn't keep data about his expenses of what he spent for fertilizer, and how much he uh, he bought the seeds for, and labor costs uh, of the production of the rice. So the bidder mobile app will gather information and give the farmer a a good a good amount of how much to sell the rice, so they will not be taken advantage by the buyer. So this is running on an Android phone, and it will be um, uh, a very useful information system for the farmer to make sure that the farmer sells his rice um, with a fair price. Okay. Now, Bubble In here is the same Bubble In that you have seen earlier, only this is in Android version. And the Android version is important because, as I said before, if you have Android and iOS, you cover pretty much 96% of the market. So in a class, you will have a specific um, uh, uh, you will have most of the students having an Android phone or a Apple phone. So it's very important that we also have uh, the Android version as well. Okay. Now UDrop is a mobile app that is requested by Mike Langston. He's an instructor at the United Christian Academy, and he said that he has a, 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 a prototype or some implementation that he has made, or it was done by a previous team, and in my class, and he wants it continued, uh, and so it's called UDrop. It is similar to Twitter, but instead of displaying text, you are displaying videos and I mean, and text as well, text and videos as well. So um, Micah approached us, and this is a continuing uh, project, but maybe you will start from scratch if he doesn't want to continue the the project. Okay, so it is for kids in this Christian academy for exchanging videos instead of exchanging text. And he said that kids love it, and so he wants to further develop UDrop. Okay. Here in the Coyote Quest project, um, we have implemented a, um, um, a Coyote Quest mobile app for the campus, and what it is a help for students or visitors of the campus find their way around the campus. So you might have that experience where you're trying to find the office of your instructor, and you are given a room number. Let's say you're trying to look for me. My office is in Jack Brown 343. And so, how do you get there? And so, probably you have a park in front of the recreational center in our campus. And when you run this Coyote Quest, you'll be guided by the mobile app at a path going to Jack Brown Hall. And then inside the Jack Brown Hall, you have to go to, the app will tell you, go to the third floor, either by stair or by elevator. And then from the elevator, you are directed by a path going from the elevator to my office. Okay? And the way we did this is to integrate SV's ArcGIS map. It is a tool that allows you to put information on a map and be able to access this particular map. And so using ArcGIS, we were able to put information like the drawing for my room, JB343. You can put information that Dr. Concepcion, that is his office. And you can do that for all the faculty, staff, administrative people in campus, offices, anything that uh, the different offices uh, uh, have, that could be put on top of that map, ArcGIS map on top of the campus map, and give you directions on how to get from where you are to a destination office. Now, for this project, we talked with Hector Ramirez, and Hector is the director of the physical facilities. And he wants the water system layout of the campus be uh, uh, overlay on the campus map. So the Coyote Quest, instead of information about offices and faculty and offices in campus, we're going to overlay the mechanical drawing of the pipes and valves of the water system of the campus, which will be a very useful information system for the maintenance people in the campus to troubleshoot if there's any problem, or uh, update and add more pipings or pipes and valves as more buildings are coming online in the campus. So this would be very useful mobile app for the physical facilities personnel. So they're very interested in this particular project. But the task that you have to do is you have to learn how to use ArcGIS map to uh, put to get that information on the layout of the pipe and control valves, and lay it over the campus map, and provide that information to uh, physical facilities. And you need to talk to Hector Ramirez. Now, Nick Perez uh, was my student in fall of 2019, and because of his because we use, as I said, ArcGIS map, because of his knowledge about this tool, Esri hired him. And so I have now three students who were hired by Esri because of their knowledge of knowledge about the ArcGIS map. So Jose Banuelos and Christopher Koenig and another fellow. I think there are four now in my class that are there. And Esri actually is our biggest employer of graduates from computer science. Last time I counted, there were about 50 alumni, all from computer science, working over there. And if you Google Esri, it is a large mapping software company in the world. They have over 1,500 software engineers in Redlands. And uh, if you are interested, you can learn also ArcGIS map, and be hired as a programmer or a software engineer at Esri, just like Nick Perez. So Nick Perez is willing to help you. Okay, so I think that's all I have for today. So I would really encourage you to start writing the SRS. Everybody should be involved in your team in writing the SRS. The SRS is a big document, so assign uh, uh, assign uh, uh, members of your team, software engineers, to certain section, and then put your sections together and submit it to me. Okay. Now the QA team, I want the QA team to um, take note of the use case diagram that is being developed in your group. Like for instance, the QA team for Monday uh, um, uh, get a copy of the use case diagram that the iBox, Divining Team, Divining Rod, SOS iOS, Bubble iOS, Know and Vote, Breath of the Coyote, use case diagram. So quality assurance team gather all this use case and study it um, uh, thoroughly because user interface will be designed out of this use case diagram. Same thing with the quality assurance for the Wednesday group. For the Wednesday group, you will uh, get a copy of the use case diagram from Bidder team, Bubblein Android version, UDrop, and Coyote Quest team. So the QA team for the Wednesday group must keep um, updated on what each team use case diagram are um, are coming up with. And because, as I said, uh, these are the uh, test cases that you will design to test whether the prototype pass or fail the QA testing. Okay, so I will talk more about that next meeting about the QA responsibility for this particular week. Okay, all right. I think I have talked a lot, so you guys be safe and healthy. See you next time. Bye bye.